As you may or may not know, I love video games. It's been a source of comfort for me for 24 years of my life, and it's been my escape from the real world and all of the negative people that I have to interact with. And over these past few months, I've been seeing all these different people give their opinions about identity politics or politics in general being in all these AAA mainstream games, and I've seen other people say we need more of it because it's a great source of representation and inclusiveness for gaming in a space that's dominated by a bunch of fat, middle-aged, balding white men who apparently have a dent in their head. And my controversial hot take is I necessarily don't care as long as the games I choose to buy are entertaining for me. Whatever I don't want to sink my teeth into, I won't, and I won't spend time purchasing anything like that because the last time I did that, I fucking bought NBA Live. But there's a game out there that some of you may be aware of. I believe it's called Stardew Valley. It's a game basically for people who like to call themselves cozy gamers. Not certain what that really means. I may mean that you all just want to play games that are comfortable, heartwarming, a little bit easy, a little bit simple, based on maybe something like Animal Crossing. I don't know. I play games based on the amount of chaos I can have. And there's been a petition apparently over the past few months trying to get the pronouns in the game. 7 years ago, Stardew Valley changed everything for indie gaming. The farming simulation game created by Eric Barone, aka Concerned Ape, is often said to be one of the greatest games of all time. Debatable. It has amassed a fan base selling over 20 million copies. There's a huge problem with the game though. When starting a new farm, you are tasked with creating a character, but there are only 2 gender options to choose from. This excludes non-binary players from feeling represented in their gameplay, forcing them to select between being referred to as a he or a she throughout the entire gameplay experience. For many trans and non-binary players, the gendered language in the game can feel incredibly disheartening and invalidating, causing feelings of dysphoria and misgender while they are playing. 2 SLGBTQIA+, I cannot say that fast, players deserve to see themselves represented to the fullest extent in their game. The gender neutrality mod is available for players on PC and has over 40,000 downloads, but with the game available on many platforms that don't allow modding, a change needs to be made to the base game so that everyone can feel represented. With the 1.6 update currently being worked on, apparently that was an update that came out through the course of this petition going on, now is the perfect time to make change like this to the game. I truly hope that this change can be made for the sake of all the amazing queer Stardew players who I have had the pleasure of encountering in this community. You are seen, you are valid, and I hope that this petition shows that you are not alone. I just noticed at the bottom it has Eric Barone's name, and it's been 201 days since the petition was created, and people are still, to this day, April 17th, 2024, as I'm recording this, still awaiting a response from Eric, which lets me know that maybe this is not really a big concern for him because it's a video game where people could come in and have fun and I guess do farm simulation. I don't know anything about Stardew Valley, so everybody who plays this can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a game based around just having a little bit of fun, and this might not really be a big deal to him. So my question to all the individuals who wanted to make this petition and reach this out so that people could see it and send it to Eric so that he knows that people care about this is this something detrimental to the game for you? If it never happens and you go your whole life playing the game and you never get this type of update, is this something that's supposed to hinder your enjoyment of the game? I understand representation this, inclusion that, and I've argued that representation in the right hands could be used properly and could be entertaining at the same time. But I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking this is not really anything that's going to make significant changes to the game, nor should be anything that completely sours anybody on the game. But for the sake of the conversation, because of course you know it was going to go this route, there's the weird percentage of people who have been awaiting a response about this, going the route of saying things like, maybe there's a little bit of transphobia. If Concerned Ape, the developer of Stardew Valley, truly doesn't want to add non-binary options and character references, he needs to say so. He needs to address his transphobia if it's there. His community deserves to know so they can go where they are loved. If he plans to add it, tell us. Demolish the hate. Yes, I'm implying transphobia. I am not afraid to admit that. Unless Eric Barone states why he has not addressed the cause for this, which has been ongoing for years, I have to start assuming the worst because it is what will keep my friends and the community safe. I'm going to be limiting who can reply because because, of course, when something like this goes viral, criticism for it tends to be something a lot of people can't understand. And I would hate being a game developer in this situation, because you make a game a lot of people enjoy, and somebody comes in and they say something like, how come you haven't added this? I'm going to start implying that maybe transphobia could be the reason, and I want to keep all my friends in the community safe. And again, gotta ask this question: if it's not there, is it a direct hindrance to you? And based on this one person, it is a direct hindrance to her, she, they, whatever the pronouns are. It's a direct problem for you. And honestly, that's sad, because you're willing to ruin the reputation of somebody or throw a bunch of accusations at them because they're not doing what you want them to do. And I would argue that's the dumbest fucking thing anyone could do, because why, in a game where apparently a bunch of people are having fun, are you wanting to start shit for no reason other than you're bored and you demand to be seen because you don't feel like your community's safe in a video game that's, I believe, based around farming? Which brought me down the rabbit hole of finding a content creator by the name of Queerly B, who wanted to make a video about the subject matter of pronouns not being addressed in the virtual world.
Some argue that given Concerned Ape's likely awareness of the request and his active choice to avoid the topic, we should consider the possibility of transphobia influencing his decision. Others caution against rushing to this conclusion, suggesting there may be alternative reasons for his silence. They advocate for a positive and non-confrontational approach to persuade him or exert pressure for the update, rather than resorting to greater levels of disruption. While I do agree that I do not want Concerned Ape to be harassed or bullied, I don't personally believe that merely asking the question whether or not transphobia might be a factor in his lack of communication equates to harassment or bullying. It's worth considering that Concerned Ape is a single developer, not a large company, but at the same time, his estimated net worth from Stardew Valley exceeds $45 million. I don't know about you, but personally, I find it challenging to empathize with millionaires, especially given that he could therefore afford to hire assistants with his game, but chooses not to.
I disagree with you, because a lot of people don't really know how to ask a question with any form of common sense. They go about it in a way that makes it seem like you either do it or we don't like you anymore, which is a tad bit disrespectful, and somebody could classify that as bullying or cyberbullying depending on where you do it, because as you've seen in this video already, we have someone who's just going to willy-nilly start implying transphobia because they're not getting their way, which is a terrible way to go about it. And if this is somebody who likes to talk about being all for everybody and they want to add it, but it takes time because you have to work around all the language that was already in a video game that came out in, I believe, 2016, you would need to work around everything. That's not just a simple quick fix. It takes a lot of time. And you sitting there saying that you really can't empathize with him because he's a millionaire, as if that's supposed to discredit the work that goes into changing an entire game to make a group of people feel better, is absolutely asinine. I agree with you. With that money, he could hire a bunch of people to do it for him, but maybe, I don't know, never met this guy. I'm just assuming at this point, this is somebody who doesn't want all the hands in the cookie jar because it might be a problem. Furthermore, this could be something to where somebody doesn't want the game to be overly political with a bunch of real world things around it, because let's be honest, the real world fucking sucks. Video games are a form of escapism, and when you have all these people wanting all these real world things, it may muddy the waters. It may make it a little bit too tiring and taxing, and maybe you'll hear that and think transphobia. What you should think when you hear that is, I don't want to stress about all this shit. I just want people to enjoy the fucking game. But apparently people can enjoy the game because they have all these language barriers that make it feel like they're not safe enough to play the video game. And if that's the case, I would argue, and maybe this is disrespectful, turn the fucking game off.
I do think it's reasonable to pose the question as to whether or not transphobia is involved in his choice to be silent. As a community, trans individuals often face disappointment from those we once trusted, including friends, family, creators, and game developers who may harbor ignorant or hostile attitudes towards us without us knowing until something like this comes up. Therefore, questioning the potential involvement of transphobia could be viewed as a valid form of self-preservation. While there are other forms of queer representation in Stardew Valley, which some may argue as a reason to assume it's not transphobia, I don't believe this is a fair comparison. It is not uncommon for individuals to be accepting of the broader queer community while disregarding the needs of trans individuals themselves. Moreover, I believe that advocating for a peaceful approach and solely relying on petitions overlooks the reality that trans players and their allies have been using this strategy for an extended period of time without any response. Concerned Ape, being a person of significant power, privilege, and wealth, has been granted ample opportunity to address address community concerns peacefully but has opted not to do so. This leaves players with limited options: either disengage from the game and withdraw support due to his communication failures, or adopt more assertive measures in protesting his actions. Considering the substantial number of trans players who deeply appreciate and support Stardew Valley, it seems reasonable to explore more disruptive methods to capture his attention and prompt him to speak up, rather than abandoning a beloved franchise.
So you mean to tell me that a game that has queer or LGBTQ representation in it doesn't have enough of it, or at least one specific part that'll make this game everlastingly great for a subsection of people, is reason enough to be a little bit more aggressive in your approach to get this addressed? Because if it doesn't get addressed, you must have it in the back, side, in front of your mind that this has to do with transphobia. Could we not just understand that maybe this dude doesn't want to spend time, effort, money, and energy into trying to restructure the whole game and the language in the game to appease a bunch of people, and instead have a game where anybody could just log in and have a little bit of fun? You can say that the petition is a little bit too peaceful. You can talk about how you have experiences of friends and family and I guess other game developers outright saying they don't like you or don't accept you, but what does that have to do with this guy? Your past experiences have nothing to do with a guy who's just sitting in a chair farting out updates every couple of months to make sure that a game works in a consistent manner. You could talk about bugs, you could talk about glitches. Those things need to be addressed, because if they don't, it leads to the game breaking and cracking apart and being something unplayable that nobody wants to touch. Look at a lot of the games that have come out in recent months that have been unplayable because nobody wants to be quick enough in dealing with updates. Coming up with better plans to be disruptive in the hopes that somebody sees it and says, oh my God, these people are making such a ruckus. They're doing all these stupid things. I'll change everything to make sure that they could just stop, is the dumbest way anybody could go about making change for a video game. It makes people look at you and say, I don't even want you playing my fucking game, because if you got to go through all of this to try to make a point that you want to feel seen, then why would I ever want to be around you or support you or want to help you? Doing that instead of hoping and asking more questions directly and doing attack mode style think pieces about how maybe as a represented trans individual you should put this in the game, it doesn't really work in your favor, and it makes people outside of the development of Stardew Valley look at you and say, wow, what fucking ignorance.
I think it's unfair that trans individuals should feel compelled to exit communities that fail to accommodate them, especially given the scarcity of inclusive spaces where we can freely exist without confrontation or exclusion. It's not uncommon for us to have to fight for our place in spaces. This situation brings to mind broader discussions around protests, where people often feel uneasy about disruptive or even violent protests. Obviously, in this case, we're not talking about violence, but I think it's important to remember that more disruptive protests often are the catalysts for meaningful change. While peaceful protests do hold value, it's crucial to not overlook the reality that they haven't always yielded results, especially considering the longstanding efforts of the trans community in this regard already. Ultimately, I don't believe transphobia is the sole explanation for Concerned Ape's silence. There could be various other factors at play, making it unjustifiable to make a definitive statement like labeling him as 100% definitely transphobic. However, I personally think posing the question and utilizing methods like tagging him in posts to apply pressure are valid actions. They represent a form of community-driven accountability, signaling to Concerned Ape the expectations of those who engage with his game. Let's maintain a respectful dialogue when discussing differing opinions on this.
This shit is fucking stupid. All you gotta do is go where you're loved. You can make a Discord with a bunch of your trans and non-binary friends, and y'all could get on a server in Stardew Valley and farm and pick animals and do all this shit. I don't know what to do in that game. I don't play that game. I've been playing Helldivers, damn it. But to sit here and think that, oh, we could all just add him on Twitter and that will lead to productive conversation. It hasn't. Look at what I showed you already in this video. Not to mention, as somebody who has a little bit of knowledge on game development, if you want to go in and change something that could potentially break other things in the game, that's a problem a lot of people are not really willing to risk. And considering that it takes a lot of time to do such a thing, I know it sounds so easy to just say, change this thing or add this thing. You have to rework a lot in order to make something work with everything else that's already in the game, with the potential that if you do add it, shit breaks, not to mention all the language barriers that are already put into a game that is years old could lead to a lot more issues that make the game fucking unplayable. So just going around saying add new features is wildly disrespectful to the amount of work that has to go into games, not to mention games that still get consistent updates and updates years later. And I noticed that he put out some recent patch notes updates about games, still hasn't been something to work around with the pronouns and making sure that everybody feels seen. I don't understand how this is a make or break for a lot lot of people. You don't feel seen in a game that you've been enjoying for years to the point where you want to make a petition because ultimately you look at a game from 2016 and say, yeah, I want this change to make me feel good. Arguably, just play the game and enjoy it. It shouldn't be that much of a make or break deal for a lot of people. Arguably, you wanting this and demanding it or petitioning for it really is the lamest thing possible because nothing about the game changes in terms of structure, in terms of gameplay. It's just you wanting to feel good in the moment because something arguably pointless is put in the game for you. And not to mention, I know I said this already, but I'll repeat it again, takes fucking time to do.
So as someone not involved in game development, I can't definitively comment on the feasibility of these changes. However, based on what I've gathered, I believe they could have been achievable with this update. The 1.6 update brought about significant additions such as a new farm type, a world map for Ginger Island, NPC updates, home renovations, extra content for pets and animals, new festivals, in-game features like a prize machine and a bookseller, changes to experience point building, new outfits, crops, and more. And I mention all of this to highlight that this update was far from simple, despite some suggesting otherwise in discussions. I've seen arguments about Concerned Ape's workload with Haunted Chocolatier and other updates, but if he could have managed all of these additions that weren't necessities, then improving game inclusivity shouldn't have been too burdensome.
I think I figured out why I'm kind of irritated by this video. It's the lack of knowledge about how much goes into putting in an update for a game that's years old by someone who might be thinking that it's just a quick, easy fix. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you realize that it takes a lot of time for this. Maybe you realize that there's a lot of work that needs to go into this. But updates about large chests and farms and NPCs and yada, yada, yada play a huge part in a lot of fucking time. All of those things play into a lot of factors, especially for these NPCs and what they may or may not be saying to you if you achieve a goal or have to do a task or have to do an objective and make sure that everything's prim and proper in your Stardew Valley. But that's a little bit different than reworking an entire character selection and making sure that based on that character selection, all the NPCs, I guess all the animals and all the plants have to accommodate that. That takes a little bit longer, especially if you have to start from the beginning and work it all the way to the current update. And this is the thing, maybe this dude has been silently working in the background this whole time, not really wanting to get everybody hyped up with it, because if he teases it, more people are going to start asking, when is it going to come? 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 This dude could turn around, come out with an update and say, hey, after all this time working on it and all this time making sure that it works with the game, here's the update to make sure that trans and non-binary people feel included in the game. Then what? Y'all gonna sit there with egg on y'all faces, knowing that y'all were sneakily thinking that this dude was a little bit of a transphobe because he didn't include these things as quick as you would want them to, and none of you motherfuckers know anything about game development. And it's weird that you'll sit there and wonder and ponder and give all these think pieces and helpful rhetoric about ways that we could do this in a peaceful, informative manner, and it didn't work. And yet, you not realizing that even though he's a millionaire and has made a lot of money based off of this game and maybe microtransactions if it's in the game, it takes time to fucking work on all of this. It takes dedicated time, especially if he's one person working on it. I said it earlier. Maybe he don't want a bunch of hands in his cookie jar. Maybe he doesn't want a bunch of people working on the same operation because he's somebody that likes to have all his hands touching everything that is his. Much respect. Can't say it's something that I wouldn't partake in myself. But you cannot sit here and create all these random thoughts in your mind about somebody because they're not doing something you want them to do, or they're not doing it as quick as you would want them to do. I think this is the first video to ever give me a headache because there's such a wild disrespect from, I guess, a community of people that want to have something in a game that they love so much. Because why would you want to imply or at least second guess if somebody's transphobic because they're not outwardly answering questions about pronouns in a game on Twitter? The game is years old. It would take time to put this in, and maybe this has been something y'all have been asking about since the game came out, and maybe I'm being a little bit heartless, but as I'm seeing it, this petition and all this discourse might have started or at least gained a little bit of traction last year. So I'm struggling to understand how much y'all think goes into game development, and it's wildly disrespectful if I was a one-man operation making a game that I guess gave me millions of dollars and a bunch of people just want to call me transphobic or at least imply I'm transphobic because I'm not doing doing something they want to do that would take time, and if I don't do it right, could break the game in different scenarios that will add to my already large load of things to put into the game so that the people who still play it to this day can enjoy. But let me know, is he transphobic? Is there a hint of transphobia in there? Or is this much to do about nothing and a bunch of people just really want to be validated, and if they don't, it's somehow an issue for a one-man operation? Subscribe to the channel. Don't be harassing individuals. They just gave their own perspective and I gave my perspective, and I will see you in the next one. I'm going to play Helldivers.